So today we're talking about The Top, which is technically The Cure's 5th studio album. So after Pornography in 1982, The Cure released a bunch of singles, right? They released The Walk and Let's Go to Bed and The Love Cats. And at this point in the band's career, the band were really just a two-piece. It was just Robert Smith and Lowell Tolhurst, who had been the drummer but then switched to keyboards because he wasn't very good at drums. And so the band was kind of lacking in members, and so as a result, it essentially just became Robert's project. Any live dates that they played then were pretty much composed of whoever Robert Smith could grab to play alongside him. In addition to doing Cure stuff, in 1983, Robert Smith joined forces with Severin from Susie and the Banshees. He was their bassist. And together, the two of them put out a project called Blue Sunshine under the band name The Glove. This is considered a side project, and it was the only release from that band. I haven't listened to Blue Sunshine enough to form a real strong opinion about it, but it's definitely a more psychedelic record. It's definitely a stranger record. This period in the Cure's history was certainly marked by a lot of drug use, and especially around this time, they were dropping a lot of LSD, and they were doing psychedelics. There's stories I've read about them drinking opium tea. And so the Cure put out these singles, right? They put out The Walk and The Love Cats, and then Robert Smith put out this Glove album. I don't believe they toured it at all. And then at the same time, he was asked to join Susie and the Banshees as a guitarist. And this was not his first time playing with Susie and the Banshees, but it was his first time writing and recording with them. And so alongside those guys, he wrote the record Hyena, and at the same time, he was also working on a new Cure album, The Top. And of course, Robert Smith wasn't just composing these records, he was also playing live shows for Susie and the Banshees and for The Cure at this time. So he was a very, very busy man. I really love a lot of Susie and the Banshees stuff, but Hyena, despite having Robert Smith on it, has never been one of my favorite records of theirs. And Robert Smith has said before that he kind of held back on that record just because of the fact that he felt like it wasn't his project, he felt like it wasn't his band. So he didn't want to overstep any bounds, and so I don't love that record, honestly. But fortunately, he didn't just stop all his creativity. No, he poured it into The Top, which is one of The Cure's most experimental, wild albums. A lot of people have said that this is essentially a Robert Smith solo album, and I don't think that's completely inaccurate, but at the same time, he is like the one mandatory component of The Cure. In order to make The Cure work in any capacity whatsoever, you have to have Robert Smith. He's like the most important member. But certainly The Cure were a very different kind of band than they had been for Pornography and Faith and etc. So as I mentioned, Lowell Tolhurst had switched from drums to keys at this point in time, and then the band, The Cure, got Andy Anderson as their drummer, and so he does some really great drumming on this album. And I'm not really all that knowledgeable about drums, but there are certain songs on here where I listen to him and I'm like, wow, this guy's amazing. This is a record that I think a lot of people don't know how to view exactly. A lot of people dismiss it as a transitional record between The Cure's goth phase and their pop phase, and it makes sense to view it that way just because of the fact that it feels like it's reaching to be more of a pop album, but at the same time, Robert Smith still has one foot in the goth world. Some of the lyrics on this are really wild and psychotic and strange, but then a lot of the music is quite upbeat and charming, and a lot of it sounds very experimental. There are a lot of sounds on this record that you didn't hear on previous Cure albums, and really this is a record I love for what it is. It's an imperfect record for sure. It doesn't have the same kind of cohesion that earlier work had, or that later stuff would have. Because as I'm saying, there are a lot of songs on here that are more poppy, there are a lot of songs on here that are more upbeat and would fit comfortably on the Head on the Door, but there are also songs on here that would not fit on that record. But at the same time, a lot of these songs wouldn't exactly be comfortable on a record like Pornography. And so I think that's what makes this record so hard for a lot of people to grasp, is just that fact that it does feel less cohesive than a lot of other work. And then, as I mentioned, this is a really experimental record. There are a lot of really strange sounds on this album that you wouldn't have heard on other Cure albums. And it really does feel like Robert Smith and The Cure were just kind of shooting in all directions with this one. And so I can honestly say that I feel like I get it whenever people don't like this album. I get why people usually rank this record very low on their tier list. But at the same time, it's one that I can't help but love. Ultimately, not every song on here works. There are songs on here that I don't really care that much for, but at the same time, whenever this album is going, it's freaking fantastic. And dare I say it, I think the highs on this album stand with some of the best highs in the rest of The Cure's discography. And even whenever I first started listening to this record in preparation for this video, I began questioning why I liked it so much before. And then I listened to it more and more and more, and I was able to get back into it, and I was able to remember this is why I love this album. And I think I actually love it more now than I did several years ago whenever I first listened to it. And so with that, let us begin our descent into The Top. Track 1 on the album is Shake Dog Shake, which has some really psychotic, angry, pissed off lyrics. Wake up in the dark, the aftertaste of anger in the back of my mouth. Spit it on the wall and cough some more and scrape my skin with razor blades. And make up in the new blood and try to look so good, follow me. Make up in the new blood and follow me to where the real fun is. But we slept all night in the virgin's bed and dreamed of death and breathed like sick dogs. We slept all night in the virgin's bed and breathed like death and dreamed of sick dogs. And so this is how the album begins, is it begins with a burst of madness. And so I guess in that sense, this song is very much in line with Pornography. Musically, I don't think it sounds that much like that record, but I think lyrically it's definitely in line with that album. This is a song that regularly gets played live, and it is realistically the only thing from the top that is included in The Cure's live sets at this point in their career. I think there's a heaviness to this song that's really excellent, and it makes it really catchy. And I think there's a weight and there's a palpable anger to it. And it feels like there's this combination of violence and rage and lust on this song that makes it really interesting to me. Whenever The Cure were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a couple of years ago, this was the song that they started off their like 4-song set with. They only played 4 or 5 songs whenever they were inducted, but this was one of them. And I think that kind of says a lot, especially whenever you consider the fact that this is not like a major hit or anything. Again, this album is not all that beloved by most people, and I think that's a mistake, but at the same time I get it. It's a weird album and it's hard to get because it's unclear who it's for. If you give this record to people who only like the Pornography album, then they will probably find it too poppy, but then if you give this album to only the pop fans, then they'll find a lot of it too harsh and too extreme for their taste. And so because of that, it's kind of like the ultimate Cure album. It touches on a lot of what makes this band great, although it doesn't wrap it up in the neatest package possible. But Shake Dog Shake I think is really strong. I think it's really fantastic. And if there's any song on this record that deserves to be played live, then I think this is a good choice. Track 2 on the album is Bird Mad Girl, and I think this is very clearly a pop track that foreshadows The Head on the Door. Even though Simon Gallup wasn't in the band at this point in time, I think this song has a really strong bass line, and I find it really catchy. It was just stuck in my head yesterday whenever I was listening to it. And I think there's a lightness to this song. The lyrics are based off of a poem by Dylan Thomas called, I think, Love in the Asylum. And so I think this song helps me to identify this album's madness and what makes it unique from the madness of an album like Pornography. Because Pornography was nihilistic and it was hateful and it was angry, but then the top is more whimsical, it's more strange. The top's particular brand of madness is less Silent Hill, more Alice in Wonderland. And really, I think that whimsy is probably the best word to use to describe not just this song, but the entire album. So Bird Mad Girl, as I mentioned, is essentially Robert Smith's take on a Dylan Thomas poem. So it's a love song, and it's a love song that's addressed to this bird mad girl. And so this song has some really rich imagery, and it also has a lot of lyrics where I'm like, I don't know what exactly that means. So I really love this part of the song. Nighttime, nighttime sets my house on fire. Oh, I'll turn into the melting man. I'll lose my life to feel I feel desire. Oh, I should feel like a polar bear. Like a polar bear, it's impossible. And there's an interview that Robert Smith did in 1990 that explains the polar bear symbolism. He said that to him, the polar bear was a symbol of insensible savagery, caged to be stared at. And so I think that's a really interesting thing to think about, especially within the context of art and the creation of records. Because anytime you make any kind of art, you're trying to capture emotions and realistically sell it to people. I think it's normal to question the integrity of your emotions, especially whenever you consider the fact that you are selling your work and trying to make a living off it. And so I can't help but feel that there's a connection there between that and, you know, the comparison to being a polar bear. But yeah, Bird Mad Girl, banger. And these first 2 tracks, I think, are a really excellent start to the album. So track 3 is The Wailing Wall, which in my eyes is the worst track on the album, which is really unfortunate. It really sucks that this is the 3rd track on the album, because it's honestly kind of boring. It does have a Middle Eastern flavor to it, and it has some really cool lyrics. I really love this first verse. The holy city breathed like a dying man. It moved with hopeful tears, with the tears of the blind. And Robert Smith has said that this song is about a trip that he took to Israel with Susie and the Banshees. And so I understand his impulse to try to capture that and try to capture what he felt during that trip. But at the same time, just as a song, it doesn't really work all that well for me. In a lot of ways, it feels like it is meant to be very hypnotic and very slow and very thoughtful, but it just comes off as more boring to me. And again, it's not like a horrible song. It's not the worst song I've ever heard, but it's my least favorite track on the album. It brings the album's momentum to a halt, and I know that's one criticism that's been lobbed a lot at this record, is the fact that some of the tempos of the songs are kind of slow. And so I think I get what he was trying to do. I think that he was trying to do something more contemplative and thoughtful, a la 17 Seconds. but it just doesn't work for me. So immediately following the slowest track on the album, you have the fastest track on the album. Track 4 is Give It To Me. And it takes the rage and mania of Shake Dog Shake and it turns it up to 11. Again, this is another very angry, pissed off song. And I've said this before, that angry is not really an emotion that I associate all that much with The Cure, mainly because I ascribe it to bands like, Slipknot or other metal bands. Whenever I think of angry music, that's more of what I think of, or like Nine Inch Nails or whatever. I don't really think about The Cure within the context of that emotion so much, but this is certainly an angry track. As I mentioned before, Andy Anderson's drumming is really excellent, especially on this track because it is one of the faster ones, and so he has a lot of room to shine. I think the drumming on this song helps it to have a lot of momentum and forward movement, and it feels like I'm forced to pay more attention to the drums on this track than I am normally for most other songs. But still, in spite of all that, it's not one of my favorite tracks. It's probably my second least favorite track. I like stuff that's fast and aggressive and experimental, but this one has just never really done it for me. It almost feels like it's too noisy. It feels like it's too claustrophobic in a lot of ways. And then, as with a lot of other songs on this album, the lyrics are really weird and trippy. I really love these words. Get away from me, leave me alone. Oh, like the pig on the stairs, hanging in a groovy purple shirt. Slit the cats like cheese, then eat the sweet sticky things. Suck harder, suck your insides out. Blood thick swimming around your feet as you're choking on the fleshy words. And so, like Wailing a lot, I think this song has some really excellent lyrics, but just musically, instrumentally, it just doesn't work for me. I just think that the entire angry, fast, manic thing has been done before by a lot of other bands, and I think it's been done better, especially since then. Track 5 on the album, which is the end of side A on the vinyl, is Dressing Up, which is a track I didn't fully appreciate until I heard the live version on Paris. It's a nice little cute whimsical track. It reminds me a lot of 6 Different Ways off the Head on the Door. And so I think it's a great example of something that foreshadows the pop music that would later come from The Cure, because it really nicely fits in with that era. And I had a friend who listened to this album for the first time like today or yesterday, and he told me that this song reminds him of a Mario 64 track. But that should really give you an idea of what it sounds like. It's nice, it's playful. There's a kind of beauty to it, almost like you're listening to a music box, but less somber and more upbeat, more happy. But this is a song that makes you want to dance a little, like a little fairy or something. It just has that playfulness and that whimsy to it that I really love. Track 6 on the album is The Caterpillar, which was the only song that was released as a single on this entire record. Quite frankly, I don't understand why this was the only single. I think Bird Mad Girl would have made for a good single. I think Shake Dog Shake could have been good. I think that Bananafishbones, which is one of the later songs, would have been good. But for whatever reason, this was the only song that was released as a single, and honestly, it's not one of my favorites. It's called The Caterpillar, and so it does have this very fluttery momentum to it, like an actual caterpillar or like a butterfly. And it does feel very light and fluffy like a cloud or something. It feels very happy, and it feels a long way removed from the darkness of pornography. And it feels very playful, but it's just not a track I've ever really loved. And I feel like there are a bunch of other songs like this. I feel like I'm Not Okay from 3 Cheers from Sweet Revenge is a great example of this, where it's a single that doesn't sound really all that much like the rest of the album. And so maybe that's why it was chosen as a single, because it doesn't sound all that much like the rest of the album. But at the same time, it does feel like it almost misrepresents this album. But then it's hard to properly represent this album because there's so much experimentation and weirdness going on. So The Caterpillar is not one of my favorite tracks, but it's a decent enough song. As I said earlier, as I've been listening to this album the past several days, I feel like I've come to enjoy it a lot more than I did beforehand, and I really love this album beforehand. And I think a lot of that has been my increased enjoyment of The Caterpillar. Because again, it's not my ideal song, but I still think it's solid. I will say though that I do think that side 2 of this record is a lot better than side A. I think that side 2 is more consistent and it's more interesting, and it's why I love this album. And so every track after this one I think is a straight banger. So track 7 is Piggy in the Mirror, which has some really weird, bizarre lyrics. And on an album full of bizarre lyrics, these are some of the weirdest. It has the same kind of whimsical feeling like Dressing Up, but at the same time it does feel like there is a hint of creepiness, a hint of darkness to it that is not present on Dressing Up. Flowers in your mouth in the same dry song, the routine from Laughterland, 16 white legs and a row of teeth, I watch you in secrecy. Footsteps on a wire high above my head, the stain reveals my real intention. I'm the waiting beast, I'm the twisted nerve, as I dance back to the body in my bed. As I dance back to the body in my bed, to the body in my bed, oh. Look at the piggy in the mirror, at the piggy in the mirror. And so this feels like a very druggy song to me. It feels like a song that's very much about being on drugs. At least if I had put money on it, I would say that's what this song is about. But the song is pretty happy. If you're not listening to the lyrics, then it probably seems, you know, pretty joyous. But I think that's one thing I like about it, is the fact that the creepiness of it is quite subtle. There's a weirdness to it and a strangeness to it, and it feels a little bit hostile because of it. Track 8 is The Empty World, which is one of my favorites. It has a flute going and it has like a marching, we're going off to war type beat to it. In The Empty World, from what I understand, is about one of Penelope Farmer's books. It's about Charlotte Sometimes, because as I mentioned in my Faith video, Charlotte Sometimes is a song by The Cure. The Empty World, I think, is probably a track that most people will look over because of the fact that it's like, you know, 2 minutes long. I think Robert Smith gives a really powerful vocal performance on this track, and I think he does on the entire album, but his vocals on this track stand out more to me than a lot of the others. And I think the reason why is because of the fact that the instrumentation on this track is very sparse. Lyrically, the song mentions dreams. She talked about the armies that marched inside her head, how they made her dreams go bad. But oh, how happy she was, how proud she was to be fighting in the war in the emptied world. I played this song for my mom, and she said, why is he talking about the Amish? Because whenever he said the armies, it kind of sounds like the Amish. But my mom was like, why did he write a song about fighting Amish people? that seems kind of whack. It seems kind of screwed up. And I'm like, I don't know, Mom. I guess that's just how people were in 1984. I don't know. But I do actually love the fact that he wrote not one but two songs about Charlotte Sometimes. It's really interesting to me. I do really appreciate whenever he and just anyone in general writes songs about books. I think that's always a really cool thing, but I think it's funny that he's out here writing not one but two songs about the same children's book. But I mean, hey, I guess you take your inspiration where you can get it from. Leave a comment down below if you would like me to review a children's book. That's been on my mind. I feel like it would be fun to talk about like a kid's book, but I don't know, maybe not. But The Empty World, one of my favorites. It's great. Track 5 is Bananafishbones, which is another literary inspired song because it's based off of a short story by J.D. Salinger, who's the guy who did Catcher in the Rye. Bananafishbones has for a long time been like maybe my favorite song on this record. Lyrically, it's just kind of so silly and druggy. There's a lot about it that just sounds very cartoonish and circusy. It just sounds very over the top, like it has a lot going on. He delivers his lyrics with such gusto on this one that it's hard not to love it. Curl into a ball like you have more fun. Oh, that would make it faster. Why do you do it? Do you do it? Do you act like you? Why do you do it? Do you act like you? Don't fight, go red and blue and black and white and sell this, sell this. Or leave it senseless like a suck on a gun. Put a piece of metal in your head, you said. Make you dead, make you hippa, hippa, hippa. I've been going around the past like 4 or 5 days and I've just been saying hippa, hippa, hippa. But whenever I sing it, it doesn't sound like Robert Smith. It sounds like Elvis or something, or like a country singer. I add like a southern accent to it for no reason. Hippa, hippa, hippa. Put a piece of metal in your head, you said. Make you dead, make you hippa, hippa, hippa. And I've been doing it for, like I said, like 4 or 5 days now, and it's just stuck in my head. And I think it's awesome. And so again, whenever I say that I love Robert Smith's lyrics, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about hippa, hippa, hippa. And he's not saying hippo here. He's just saying hippa. Like he's making up a word. He's hippa, hippa, hippa. That doesn't mean anything. That's just nonsense. It's gibberish. And then I like when he says, curl into a ball like you have more fun, because that reminds me of Kano from Mortal Kombat, because he has the ability to spin into a ball for no reason at all. It's like Sonic, only he's Australian, and so I assume all Australian people have that ability to curl into a ball. Put a piece of metal in your head, you said. Make you dead, make you hippa, hippa, hippa. I was trying to do the sound from the song, but it just sounds like a Mario thing. I think I'm starting to see what my friend said about sounding like Mario. Hippa, hippa, hippa. Anyways, Bananafishbones is awesome. I love it. They should play it more. They should play it every show, honestly. Bananafishbones is so good. It's like half the reason why I love this album. But on to track 10, I guess. So track 10 at the top is called The Top. The Cure at this point in their career did a thing where just every final song in the album was the titular track for whatever reason. I don't know, it's kind of cool, I like it. But The Top is a song that I didn't like for a very long time. I didn't like it for years. And the reason why was because I felt like it was the same sort of thing as the Wailing Wall, in the sense that it was kind of boring and monotonous. But then during my most recent listens to the album, I started to get really into it. Because it is a slower track. It is something that is kind of dragging in some ways. But it actually managed to have the intended hypnotic effect on me that I think Robert Smith probably wanted it to. And I think it is hypnotic because of the fact that the bass doesn't really change throughout the entire song, if I'm not mistaken. Robert Smith's vocals weave in and out, and the guitar playing and the drums are really interesting, and the keyboards, but the bass, so far as I remember, is consistent and constant. And so anytime I put this track on for the first minute or two, I'm just like, all right, we're doing this song. And then like at some point I go from being like not into it at all to being all the way into it and loving it. And so I was driving the other day and this song came on and I, was gonna skip it, but then I decided to listen to it, and then I got so into it that I just put it on again. And I think I listened to it like 2 or 3 times in a row, and I've never done that before with this song. But this song, The Top, I like it a lot. And lyrically, it does sound like a breakup song. It sounds like he's singing about wanting someone to come back. I've seen where some people have said that this is about Simon Gallup, the bassist, because this was the only period where Simon Gallup wasn't in The Cure. But regardless, I think that the lyrics to it are just really thoughtful and interesting. I kind of love what he does at the beginning where he says something and then he says, I wish I could say that, really. I don't care, if only I could say that and not feel so sick and scared. I don't care, if only I could say that, if only my eyes would close. And I really love that idea of admitting that you say you don't care, but you wish that you actually meant it. Because I think that most people have probably been there before. Everyone has said, I don't care at one point or another, but sometimes you wish that you meant it more than you actually did. Sometimes you say that you don't care, but the truth is that you actually do care at least a little bit. And sometimes that can feel like weakness, other times it can just feel like an annoyance. But I don't know, I just really love that first verse, that admitting of saying that you don't care and then wishing that you could actually mean it. But The Top is a lonely track, I think. It's a song about being alone because he sings about wanting everyone else to come back. Every day I lie here and know that it's true. All I really want is you. Please come back, like all the other ones do. And then he finishes the song with please come back, all of you. And so I really love this song because of that desire for connection and that desire for real love. And I really love this line in the chorus, this top is the place where nobody goes. Because I think that whenever the album refers to the top, I think it refers to literally the toy, because the beginning and end of this song have the sound of the top spinning. So I think that this song and the album title are references to the toy, but I also think there's this idea the top is the place where nobody goes. I think there's this idea that it's difficult to reach the ideal. It's difficult to reach the ideal state or the ideal plane. It's difficult to be where you want to be and to truly arrive there and feel like you've arrived. This album is not really cohesive, but I think that a song like this is able to have some kind of emotional depth to it that makes the entire album feel more rich as a result. Because you do have songs on here that feel more happy and upbeat, and then you have songs on here that are more angry and pissed off, and then finally the album ends with The Top, which seems to come from a very raw, vulnerable place. And so I think that that's why I love this song, is because of the fact that it is able to bring the anger and the happiness together under one roof. The Top is kind of the song where it feels like the truth comes out. And it's like, yeah, I'm angry and I'm bitter and I'm pissed off, but I'm also happy and I'm whimsical. I'm having a great time and I'm very playful and whatever else. But then The Top is just this song where it's like, man, I wish that things weren't what they are. I wish things were different. And so, I don't know, it's able to bring the album together in a really meaningful and emotional way for me. So there are a few B-sides to this record. I honestly don't have that much to say about them though. Happy the Man I think is an okay track, and then Throw Your Foot I think is really excellent. I think it's really good and catchy. And then there are some demos on the deluxe edition of the album. Ariel is a version of the song that is, it actually comes from like the earlier 80s, from like 1982 or something. I think it's a pretty song. I think it's pretty good. There's a demo for a song called The Hand Inside My Mouth. It appears to me that this was almost an earlier version of 6 Different Ways, because a lot of the same lyrics appear on both songs. So I don't know if he cannibalized the lyrics from this song or if he just transformed it into what became 6 Different Ways. And then the last track on the deluxe edition of the album is Forever, which I think is really excellent. Again, if you don't recall, Forever was one of the few improvised songs that the Cure were doing at this point in time. Forever stems from the 17 Seconds Faith era originally, and I think this version of the song is really cool. It has saxophone on it. If you want a fun writing exercise, try writing the words that you hear. Because on a song like this, it's really difficult to make out exactly what the frick Robert Smith is saying, and I bet that even he doesn't know what he's saying. Because again, this track was improvised and it was all live, it was all just one take. And so I did this one night where I sat down and I tried to write out the lyrics, and I gave myself some creative license. You know, there are certain parts of the song that you can make out pretty clearly, but a lot of it is you can't really make out at all. And so if you're looking for creative inspiration, then that's just something you can do. I don't do it regularly, but I think every now and then I think it can be fun to do an exercise such as this. So the top. As I said before, this is an album I really love, but it's just not as cohesive as a lot of the Cure stuff that came before or after it. And so I get why people don't like it. I think that it really suffers from having some of my least favorite tracks on side A of the record. And again, I think side 2 of the record, I think side B is just so much better. I say that if you're a longtime fan and you don't like this album, give it another shot, honestly. I think it's really good. So far as rankings go, I am going to put it in the number 4 position so far. I like it more than Japanese Whispers and Three Imaginary Boys and whatever else. Again, this is an album that I really love, just on its own merits. But still, its lack of cohesion makes me place it below Faith, 17 Seconds, and certainly below Pornography. So as of now, it is ranked kind of middle in the road. We'll see if it stays that way. I really love this album. I like it a lot. And I think there's a lot of merit to be gained from looking at things that are imperfect, things that are really good but imperfect, as opposed to things that are just straight masterpieces. I think it can be more fun to evaluate things like that, things that are B's or C's as opposed to A+. So far as recommendations go, I don't know what exactly to recommend for this album because it's kind of weird and all over the place. I mentioned Alice in Wonderland already. I'm planning on giving that book a reread sooner than later. So far as music goes, I really love Queens of the Stone Age, who are another very druggy band. So I think that you could probably get into like Rated R, because that's another album that is very much influenced by the usage of drugs. It's another album that's really kind of experimental and all over the place. I think another record by them, Era Vulgaris, is completely different, but at the same time it kind of fits in with some of the mood of the top of like Shake Dog Shake. I think it fits in with some of those heavier tracks. If you like this album, go ahead and listen to old video game soundtracks, listen to Mario. If you like the trippiness of this album, then read Philip K. Dick, read Ubik. I started rereading Hellblazer, and literally in the very first issue, John goes on a psychedelic trip. So check out Hellblazer. But this has been my video covering the top. And honestly, this album, because of the fact that not everyone likes it, it has a very special place in my heart because of that. So thank you for watching, have a nice night, and goodbye. Shake, 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 dog, shake, dog, shake. All night in the virgin's bed. Curl into a ball like you have more fun. Oh, that will make you faster. Why do you do it? Do you do it? Do you act like you? Why do you do it? Do you act like you? Oh, fight your ready blue and back and when you sell this. Put it talking like some kind of gun. Put a piece of metal on your head, you said. Make you dead, make you hippo, hippo, hippo. Hippo. Hippo, hippo. Hippo. Hippo, hippo, hippo.